In the halls of Asgard, the home of the Asgardians, the memory of Loki's complex origins had gradually faded. Loki, the Lord of Fire, was a flame of duality. He could warm, but also destroy. He could illuminate the darkness of winter nights, but also burn down old, decaying trunks to make way for new life. Like a flickering flame, Loki was constantly in motion, torn between the worlds of the Asgardians and the giants. While the giants despised him for his shift of allegiance to the Asgardians, a faction among the Asgardians harbored mistrust against him due to his unclear origins. In an attempt to prove himself to the Asgardians, Loki had skillfully won the Asgardian woman Sigyn as his wife and fathered 2 sons with her. In Asgard, concern was steadily growing. Loki, who was increasingly trying to integrate himself into the world of the Asgardians, found himself in an ever-complicating situation. His efforts to earn the Asgardians' favor through actions against the giants were not in vain. He had, after all, won Sigyn, an Asgardian woman, as his wife and fathered 2 sons with her, but they were not enough to dispel the growing skepticism. Loki's longing for his former home, Jotunheim, had never completely faded, and so he had fathered additional children there with the giantess Angerboda. These children were different. They carried the wild and unpredictable energy of the giants within them. The eldest son took the form of a massive wolf. The second son was a gigantic serpent that hid in the depths of the sea. And the daughter, a mysterious being, half blue and half flesh-colored, embodied the dark side of healing and death. The news of this second family of Lokis soon reached Asgard, and the Asgardians recognized the potential danger posed by these children. They knew that these siblings were growing up quickly in Jotunheim and were being raised by a mother who had already caused much unrest and sorrow. Even more unsettling was the fact that Loki, their father, was a divisive figure whom the Asgardians had never fully understood or trusted. The Asgardians convened a council. They had to act before this new generation, shaped by Loki's complex personality and Angerboda's raw power, would become strong enough to disrupt the fragile balance between Asgard and Jotunheim. But what should they do? Should they bring these children to Asgard and attempt to tame them? Or should they take preventive measures to ensure these potentially dangerous beings never got the chance to unleash their true potential? Tensions rose, and in the hearts of the Asgardians grew the realization that they had to make a decision that would affect the fate not only of Asgard, but of all 9 worlds. Odin, the Allfather and leader of the Asgardians, eventually passed judgment. He turned his attention to Loki and Angerboda's second son, who had manifested as a gigantic serpent. This creature, known as the Midgard serpent, was so enormous that it could coil around the entire world. Odin recognized the threat posed by this being and cast it into the great ocean that surrounds Midgard. There, the serpent continued to grow until it became so large that it could encircle the entire world and bite its own tail. Odin knew that the day would come when Thor and the Midgard serpent would face each other in a deadly battle, a harbinger of Ragnarök. But for now, he had removed the monster far enough from Asgard to avoid immediate danger. Furthermore, he decided that Hel, the daughter of Loki and the giantess Angerboda, should be sent to Niflheim, the land of the dead and cold. There she was granted the power and responsibility over the realm of the dead, henceforth also called Hel. Into this world came the souls of those who had not died in battle, but had passed away naturally through age or illness. The journey to Hel was long and arduous, leading through the northern lands to the border river Gjörla. A bridge, known as the Gjörl Bridge, spanned the river and marked the transition into the realm of the dead. Hel's domain was vast in scope. Its walls and fences were so high that they seemed nearly insurmountable to the living. Although Hel was not considered a place of punishment, it was a dreary, damp, and cold location. The conditions here were harsh and inhospitable. The bowls on Hel's tables were only half filled, and her knives were designed to create hunger rather than satisfy it. Her servants were slow and sluggish, in keeping with the general character of this place, also known as the Land of Nod. Before the threshold to Hel's realm lay a pitfall, presenting further dangers to those who entered. One could fall ill in Hel's bed, and whoever saw her bed often felt an ominous sensation. Hel herself was a grim figure. She always looked down with a sullen facial expression. In the meantime, the Asgardians had confined the young wolf, known as Fenrir, to an enclosure. They intended to raise and tame him. However, the wolf grew rapidly and became increasingly wild. Soon, only Tyr, the bravest of all gods, dared to approach him to feed him. The Asgardians recognized the growing threat and convened in the Council of Gods to decide the fate of the wolf. Heimdall, the guardian of the gods, advocated for immediately slaying Fenrir to ward off the impending danger. But the decision was still pending, and while the Asgardians debated, Fenrir continued to grow, and his eyes sparkled increasingly ominously. It was clear that a decision had to be made, and quickly. Baldur, the god of light and purity, considered Asgard too sacred to stain it with the wolf's blood. Thor, the god of thunder, felt it would be dishonorable to kill the wolf. It would deprive him of the chance to prove himself. Odin, the Allfather, sensed a secret connection to the creature and wanted to train it for battle against the giants. While the gods continued to debate, Fenrir tirelessly grew stronger and more terrifying. Eventually, the Asgardians had no choice but to create a special chain. They named this chain Lading and challenged the wolf to test his strength against it. Fenrir sensed the weakness of the chain and allowed himself to be bound. But as soon as he pressed his paw against the chain for the first time, it snapped. The Asgardians realized they faced an even greater challenge. A simple chain could not hold this powerful being. And so the search for a solution continued, while Fenrir grew stronger each day. Then, the gods forged a second chain, twice as strong, which they named Droma, the Restrainer. Again, they challenged Fenrir to prove his strength against this chain. After a brief inspection, the wolf decided the challenge was worth it. He allowed the chain to be placed around him and began to shake and stretch. With a powerful kick, he broke this chain as well. The pieces flew far and wide, and Fenrir felt more powerful than ever before. The gods now recognized that the wolf was a serious threat. Unable to forge a stronger chain, they sent Skirnir, the companion of Freyr, to the land of the Black Elves to seek the help of the dwarven smiths. These dwarves crafted an extraordinary chain named Gleipnir, made of the most impossible materials. The sound of a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, the roots of mountains, the breath of fish, and the spittle of birds. When Skirnir returned with the chain Gleipnir, the Asgardians thanked him for his efforts. Now came the crucial test. Would this wondrous chain be able to restrain the mighty Fenrir? The wolf pondered. His mistrust of the delicate band was heavy, but the temptation to prove his strength once more was greater. Finally, he agreed, under one condition. During the trial, one of the Asgardians' hands would be held as a pledge in his mouth. If the chain held and they did not release him, he would take the hand as the price for their betrayal. Tyr, the brave god of war, was the only one who had the courage to place his hand into the wolf's mouth. Fenrir insisted it be Tyr's right hand, the oath hand. The other Asgardians fastened the chain Gleipnir around Fenrir. As soon as it was tightened, the wolf tried to tear it apart. He shook himself, braced his paws against it, and pulled with all his might. But the more he struggled, the tighter the band became. Realizing he had been deceived, Fenrir snapped shut and severed Tyr's hand. But the sacrifice was not in vain. The dangerous Fenris wolf was bound and no longer posed a threat to the Asgardians. They fastened the wolf to a gigantic rock with a chain attached to Gleipnir and stuck a sword into his mouth so he could no longer bite. There he stayed until fate would call him again at the time of the great final battle, Ragnarök. Thus, The Fenrir wolf was bound, his roaring fury and deadly power confined by the cunning of the Asgardians and Odin's sword. His threats and howls echoed through the halls of Asgard, but they were now just distant echoes of his former power. Deep in the earth, anchored to a rock, he could only wait for the day of Ragnarök, the day the chains would break and destiny would be fulfilled. Tyr, although he had lost his hand, was honored for his courage and sacrifice. He had proven that sometimes a great price must be paid to avert an even greater danger. Odin, the All-Father, knew that this was just one chapter in the infinite saga of fate. He understood that the bound Fenrir was merely the calm before the storm, the calm before the inevitable Ragnarök. But for the moment, the Asgardians had gained time they urgently needed to prepare for the challenges that lay ahead.